Hi everyone. Welcome to the talk. Can you all hear me? Just want to do an audio check before I start. If you can just type in the discuss space and confirm that you can hear me. Okay, I don't see any messages, so I'm not sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Um, welcome to the first talk of the Applied Games track for today, Games as Cultural Messengers, by Mr. Ali Karami and Dr. Aideen Mehdi-Zadeh. Before I introduce my talks for the speakers for the day, a shout out to all the sponsors. Huge thank you to them. Take a moment to just thank all of our sponsors: the presenting sponsor Unreal Engine, gold sponsors NPL, AWS, Glance, and Jungli. Legacy silver sponsors Gamission, Lakshya, and Yesno. Bronze sponsors Quali and Gameon. Hyper casual track sponsor Sunday. IP Connect sponsors Succeed Innovation Fund. Thank you all so much. A couple of quick notifications before we introduce our speakers. On your right, you see a Q&A section. That's where you can post your questions for the talk. So that's really important because at the end of the talk, we are going to have a question and answer session, and that's the most exciting part where we get to hear what are your thoughts, what are your questions. So please feel free to post in your questions. And we do have a feedback form, which I will share shortly. And you will see that in the handout section. So feel free to fill it in at whenever you can during the talk or at the end of it. But please do fill it in because that's really helpful for us. And the discuss space that's on your right, that's for you to talk. You can post your comments, your observations during the talk. If you want to appreciate something or the talk, feel free to do that. So that's about the UI. So now time to introduce our speakers. So the first speaker for the day, we're going to have two speakers on this talk. Mr. Ali Shirkarami, he's a researcher and advisor with the Iran Toy Supervision Council. Ali has studied Master of Education Technology at Alama Tabata University in Iran. His interest has always been to blend play and learning, so the process of learning becomes more appealing. He has also designed several concept games and toys, all with an educational sense. And since 2015, he's been working with the Idea Azad toy event. He's also been on the scientific and educational committee at the Iran National Toy Festival and has been part of various international events. And he's recently become the advisor of Iran Toy Supervision Council. So that's Mr. Ali Shirkarami for you. And our second speaker is Dr. Aideen Mehdi-Zadeh. He's the designer and secretary at Iran Toy Supervision Council again. And Dr. Aideen has a PhD in curriculum design, and he's the founder of two main toy and game-related events in Iran. Again, the Idea Azad event and the National Toy Festival. And he's the secretary of the Toy Supervision Council in Iran. He's basically been researching about and has designed various toys and games in the last decade or so, and some of which are awarded in national festivals. So really excited to call them on, and I can't wait to get the talk started. So I'm just going to get them live. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. We've got them live. Okay. So welcome, Ali and Dr. Aideen. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to hand over the session to you. Can you hear me?
Okay, sorry, yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can
Okay.
hear you.
Yeah. So I'm just going to hand over the session to you. And yeah, have a fun session. I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Okay, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at the uh, Game Developer Conference in India. I am here with Dr. Aydin Mehtizadeh, who will also help me throughout the presentation. And we are going to talk about games as cultural messengers. And after that, we will have Q&A. And if you have any questions, we both would be more than happy to answer them. So let's get started and let me share my screen. Okay, so what we are going to talk about today is uh, games as cultural messenger. Yeah, so the thing is, in the past, cultural development took place in the context of stories, books, and movies, but today things have changed a lot. Today's games and board games, or the new form of media, are the cultural messengers, and users are no longer passive and they have constructive interactions. So back in the day, people used to learn about cultures or even convey the cultures with books and newspapers. And after a while, when the cinema industry came, they will share their experiences, their stories with the movies that they made. So we are going to point out the main conveyors. Yeah, and since games are based on interaction and collaboration, they can transmit cultural values. So games are, we can say they are a new form of cultural messenger or cultural conveyor, and they're a very useful tool to enhance the player experience as well. So what are the main conveyors of cultures? Since games are based on interaction and collaboration, they can transmit cultural values, a very useful tool to enhance the player experience, as I said. But the main conveyors of cultures are newspaper and books, movies and theaters, tales and nursery rhymes and lullabies, and also stories. These are the main categories that we recognize that convey the culture in different nations and help people to understand and get to know other uh, values and all those things. So, but the most important conveyor, we could say, they are story and narratives. They are the most important conveyors. And if you just search the phrase narratives as cultural conveyors in Google, you will get more than 11 million results. And there are lots of articles and papers, yeah, right, and that you can read about and the importance of narrations and story and also storytelling. That there are lots of new approaches and attitude in different fields. For example, you can see lots of workshops and lots of books and also articles about storytelling in different fields, from management to even the industrial field. And yeah, so what is a story in the first place? So a story is the telling of an event. Either it's a true story or a fictional, in such a way that the listener experiences or learns something just by the fact that he or she heard the story. So a story is a means of transferring information, experience, attitude, or point of view. So that's why we call a story the most important convey of culture, because they are born to gives information about different things to people. And also, there is another definition that a story is a depiction of a journey. In a story, we follow a character or a series of characters on a journey as they pursue something up against certain obstacles, or they want to achieve certain goals as well. So what are the main elements of a story? There are 7 main elements in a story that we are going to talk about, and we want to see after that what's the relation between elements of a story and the importance of game as a cultural messengers. So the first thing is the theme, and let me say something, that plot is different from a story. We get to that first. So plot is what happens in a story, but the theme is why it happens. So it's a reason which you need to know while writing the plot. If you are writing the plot for your games or even writing a story, so you should be aware of the difference between theme and plot. The second element of story is the characters. Characters should be believable and feel knowable. The main character is a protagonist, also known as the lead or hero or heroine, and also maybe there are characters that are the bad guys and the evil in the stories. There are also they could be the main character as well or the supporting characters as well. So the next important element of story is the setting. This may include location, time or era, but it should also include how things look, smell, taste, feel and sound. So actually it's the space or the room or whatever you call it, the place that you build up your story and want to address the whole thing, the whole characters or the goal and the flow of the story in it. The fourth important thing is the point of view or the POV, and with point of view, we decide two things. One is that the voice you will use to write your story. Is it a first person, or is it a second person, or a third person? And who will serve as your story's camera? You can see in many stories and also in games that you are following the story or watching the story from someone who is actually telling the story, and sometimes you are in the mind of the characters, or even you are the character itself, and you are along with the character while he or she making any decisions or decide to do the things. So there are different point of view or POVs when it comes to the fourth element of story. Okay, the fifth important element in stories are the plot. What is actually plot? Plot is the sequence of events that make up a story. It's what compels reader to either keep turning the page or set the book aside. It's actually similar to what we call the dynamic of the game, that actually focus on the flow of the story of the game, that keeps you continue along the story and keeps you motivated to see, okay, what happened next, what will the character do, or what will be the result of this event, and etc. And the sixth important element is the conflict, and conflict is actually the engine of fiction and is crucial to effective non-fiction as well. Readers crave conflict and long to see what results from it. We usually refer to conflict as mechanics of the games, because we use that mechanics to actually solve the problems or tackle the obstacles in the game and try to solve the mystery or the puzzle or anything like that. And the seventh element is the resolution. So it's about how you expect the story to end and should inform every scene and chapter. It may change, evolve, or grow as you and your characters experience the inevitable arcs, but never leave it to the chance. So a resolution is actually gives you uh, like the final stage of the main events of the story. So it will help you and tells you what will things end and how the things will going to evolve and how will characters will going to grow and what will they achieve through the process of the story. So these are the seven main elements of stories. But why do we say that games are the new and the most important cultural conveyor or cultural messengers? Because actually games share these seven values within them, and they are even more advanced and they have more features than just stories. For example, like in the first element that we mentioned, the themes may be the one that is quite similar in story and game, and they both convey the main message. But the thing is, when it goes to the second part and about the characters, characters in games are affected by players' experience and actually the player's personal culture. So whether you are playing a game, and when I say game, it could be a digital game, it could be a board game, or it could be a card game. It doesn't matter really. So a player experience whatever he or she has experienced in life or in other games or even in the earlier stage of that same game will affect how the character evolve, and it will affect how the character do the things and everything in the game, and also the personal culture that we have also as players will affect the game. For example, we grow up learning different stories or different tales in our culture. For example, a personal culture of a player in Iran is definitely different from someone in Japan or India or US. So that's a very important feature that is very bold and important in games.
Excuse me, and the effect, the decisions that makes with persons and characters.
Mhm.
But in stories, we don't have this.
Yeah. That's a really great point. Uh, so the character, when it's joined with the player also affecting the results and the different part of the story. Yeah. So you can also change the direction of the story or change the direction of how the events and the sequence and everything that many a story doesn't really have, because in the stories you just have there's only one way, there would be only one answer to the question, or there would be only one ending scene to the story at the end of the book or at the end of the story. So the third um, element that we mentioned is the setting. So settings are mainly affected by players as the game progress and by house rules as well. So you may have a fixed setting somehow in just stories in other media that only gives you a quick view and helps you imagine how the story going to evolve and how do you feel about the characters and the places that you are. But in game, the settings is actually really affected by the players and also by the house rules. And when I say house rules, I'm not sure whether it's that much strong in digital games, because also in digital games we have fixed rules that we cannot change that much. But when it comes to physical games like board game or toys and card games, that's really common that players set up their own rules. For example, I want to play a card game or board game, we decided with our friends that let's change some rules and add other rules that we think it would like make the games more funny or more interesting. So we are changing the setting in that way, which is which isn't something that you could do in a story or in many of the video games or digital games. So the fourth element that we mentioned is the point of view or the POV, and in that each player could have a unique POV depending on the story. For example, in games, if you switch between characters, or if you choose certain characters, your POV would be completely different. For example, in a fighting game, you could be the leading hero, or sometimes you could be like a factory or a supporting team that have more like a wider or strategic point of view, or you could be like any a very normal person living in the city or etc.
It's just but in the one game, two person maybe have a two point of view. Maybe a point of view.
The personal point of view.
Yes, yes, a point of view of loser or winner. That's different between this point of view, but both of them um, on real time and same spaces in one game.
Exactly, yeah. That's a really important point that Dr. Aydin has mentioned. Is that when you are playing in the game, whether it's digital or analog game or board game or whatever, your attitude toward the game is also building up your point of view. For example, if you are entering a game uh, with afraid of events that are going to happen, or whether you are going to lose, or you are not sure about the things that are going to happen, or will you make it to the end, that will actually affect your point of view. It will be more conservative, or on the other hand, you think you would be very courageous, or you would run through the different events and try new things and get to the different levels very fast and not afraid of not afraid of the events that you are going to face and the different challenges. So these personal thoughts and personal attitudes will also affect the point of view, which is not something you could find in stories. In stories, there are fixed point of views that the writers has written. So the writer actually is the one who telling you how you should look through the different characters, or how you should try to bond with the story or with the character. But in games, that's completely different. In games, whatever you have experienced in your life and whatever you think about the game or how games makes you feel is actually effective on the point of view.
And maybe you are bad man, or you are
Exactly.
good man.
Yeah.
And that's that's make a different point of view.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah. And also whether you want to be the bad guy or the good guy, as Aydin has mentioned, is also very effective on the POV. For example, you may choose a good character, but you are planning to destroy everything. Yeah, that's only possible in games, not in stories. Because in stories, if you are with the villain, so the villain will destroy everything, and you cannot help it or change anything that he or she wants to do.
And you have different resolution at the end of game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and also you will have different resolution whether you are going to be the good guy or bad guy. So that will also affect the other major elements in the story or the game. So the fifth element that we have talked about is the plot. So games are very dynamic due to different or an endless type of actions that players can perform. For example, in games, you can do, depending on how the game is designed, you can do different actions. You may decide not to do in certain terms. For example, in some board games, you may decide not to play that round and keep your energy or save your energy or yeah, and keep things for later and somehow predict things that will happen later. So you save your assets for that. But in story, the plot is somehow fixed. You cannot really choose what to do, or you cannot change the sequences of the event. You will only you will observe actually what will happen. But in games, since they are very dynamic and they have different types of actions, you may choose from the big list of actions, or even play freely and choose like whatever actions that you think may suit that certain stage of the game. So the sixth element is conflict. So actually conflict we refer to as game mechanics that are there to make a difference, like an unlimited range of mechanisms, and each suitable for a specific purpose. For example, when you are playing a game or playing, for example, a challenge, or a board game or a card game, depending on the situation that you are in or the challenge that you are facing, you may be able to select the mechanism that will suit that situation the best. So you will be able to, for example, at some stages you may want to share your cards or share your tokens or share your, for example, or guns or anything that you have with other players, or store them somewhere, or even skip some certain events. So that's what the game mechanics or the game mechanism will gives you, and it gives you the freedom to move and decide on your own how you want to tackle these conflicts and all those difficulties throughout the process and throughout the story or the game story as well. But as we have said before, in stories, conflicts are rather fixed, So, and you just have to go through them as the author or the writer have decided so. And the final difference between a story and games is the resolution, and it's about different ending with different characters. There are lots of games, digital games or perfect mobile games or board games and card games that gives you the freedom to choose how will you end the story, or how can you end the character uh, story, or which character you want to finish the game or the story with. But it's not something that you could find in the stories themselves, because they are more of a fixed resolution, and with the characters that are set up in the game, you will have certain ending and fixed endings. But in games that would be different. For example, as we said, you may play a good character, but you decided to have that ending that was at first decided for the bad guy. So yeah, maybe I choose a good character, but I want to go through the wrong way and do the other things, so to see what things would happen like that. But in a story that is very little, and you don't have much access to it.
And you must care about these differences between story and games. But these are is similarity of story and games in the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So these are actually the seven elements that we have mentioned are similar between stories and games, but most of them we do believe that have stronger effect and stronger force, and are more effective in the platform of game or in game areas, because they give you overall more flexibility. They give you more chance or more options to actually interact with the game or with whatever you are facing. So that's why we call games as cultural messengers, because we do believe that in the May conveyors, as we have mentioned, among the stories and tales and lullabies that we grow with, that really build up our characters in real life, stories are the best one, because they are this complete package. They have a perfect beginning, they have a perfect ending, they involve they involve you, and and bond you with different characters, and you actually will feel how the story was going on. You connect with the author, and sometimes and they will also give you a hint of how, for example, people were living or thinking in certain eras or in certain historical times, or even how someone feels or what they do in certain circumstances or in certain challenges that you may not be able to experience yourself. These are all the same features in stories and games as well. But in games, since you have more freedom and you will have more access to different resources, you can actually build your own story. It helps you to move the direction of the game or the story of the game in whatever direction that you want, or decided to change the sequence of the events, or even change the, for example, the setting, and make it more your own, and even also insert your own personal culture or personal experience to the game and play the way that you would feel more like you are owning the game story. So these are the main seven elements that are similar between stories and games, but may be more effective and more useful in game design as well. So yeah, so as a result, games are the
Ali,
narrative. Yeah.
sorry, just a quick time check. We've got about 5 minutes more, and
Oh, we have only 5 minutes.
we are at 6:30. Yeah, so around 5 minutes, and then we can start the Q&A. So,
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
we are in, yeah.
The,
This
the,
is the
la- the
last
last, the
slide.
last
Yeah,
slide.
thank you so much. So as a result, games are the narrative context, and players are not merely the operators, but act on their own and are no longer passive. So let's rethink this whole thing in our game design process. Whenever you are facing a game or facing a toy or playing a board game or card game with your friends, think about the cultural values that the game may teach you or that the games may convey to you from that culture that it came from. For example, maybe you are playing a board game about the historical era in Europe, and you will learn a lot about how people were used to live, or even get even the art of the game will help you to actually feel and uh, get to know about the cultural values and the artistic themes of that certain era. Okay, thank you so much for listening, and we will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Ayub.
so much for listening.
So, yeah, I've been keeping an eye out on the questions, and really, by the way, audience really enjoying the discussion that's happening offline in the discuss panel. So that's great to see. So yeah, we do have a couple of really interesting questions. I'll just get started with them. So the first question that we have is from Dayanand. With hyper casual games booming, do you think players are much more attracted to other elements like visuals than the story?
Mm-hmm. Well, we think that the visual or the story are actually going well together.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you can say that the visual is more effective in certain stories, or even if you are talking about the game or in certain games. Maybe in short term, the visual will be the major thing that will attract the games, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but as the time goes on, for example, when you are releasing a game, maybe in the first few weeks or first few months, if it has for example, let's say it has a really perfect visual effects and perfect graphic design, but after that it will get somehow people get used to it. In that time, what actually the game is going to convey is the thing that helps it keeps glowing and keep be trending. If you look at the traditional games, or even just like chess, for example, as you can see, chess doesn't have like a perfect graphic design, or many other games like Othello or Platas. Yeah, many games that you can think of, they may not have the perfect visual effects or the perfect graphic design, but they have that core that actually, or the perfect story that keeps them training for over more than 20 years or 30 years. Yeah.
Thank you. That was well answered. If you do have, to add on, like if those who are asking questions, and if you have more thoughts on that, or you want to kind of add on to that question, you can feel free to do that. I'll be reading it out from the question panel. So yeah, the next question is curious to know how could one capture the power of story in a format like board games. So maybe
So
just a
you mean that? Mhm. So you mean capturing the a perfect story in a board game?
yeah, like I think this is in relation to you were talking about at some point the difference between story and characters and thought and all of that. So how would one capture that in a format like board games? Maybe I guess just talk about a few examples that strike, or I don't know.
Okay. So the thing is, whether you are, it happens that, lots of many times that we have a mechanic for a game. For example, we have a core game, but it doesn't have a theme or a story attached to it. And I think it's really similar between digital games or board games or card games. Yeah, it's actually the same. We do believe that it's the same. So when you have that mechanics or the whole system of the playing, or for example, how one character or avatar will act in the process of the game, if you think more about that, and if you have like a good knowledge or a good um, memory of different stories, you will definitely find a good story that will fit that game. Yeah, yeah. But in order to get to that point, I think that you should really read a lot. Actually, the most important thing that we talk about when we are having a meeting with designers or new designers. We always tell them to read a lot, lots of books and stories, and even read the games and study the games. It actually helps you to learn from the successful games that how they uh, got the story and attach it to the game that they would both match. And also, if you read a lot of books about different things, we believe that when you are a designer, it doesn't matter in anything. If you are a graphic designer or a industrial designers, you have to be open to everything. You should be open to learning new things. And if you have that valuing yourself, when you face a new game that you just have designed or come up with the idea and don't have a theme or a story for it, if you think about it and just think about the stories that you have read or have a research on that, you will definitely find a story that will fit your game mechanic or the story or the flow of the game or how the events should happen.
Because of we have these elements, this, the reason of this discussion and any thing we say about that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
That's great.
So,
Thank
is
you.
there any?
So I think what I will do is there's another question that kind of relates to what you were saying. So I'll just ask that one first because you were talking about how we could kind of research and kind of get inspiration. So from other examples. So there's a question that says, "What are some of your favorite games? What stood out for you? Did you learn something from it that you found you could apply in your work at some point?"
You mean, for example, we see a game that we could learn something from it and apply it in our games?
Yeah, so this is more like a personal choice also. Like in your life, what are some of the games that were inspirations for you probably, and what are some of your favorite games? Um, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. As we have mentioned, the personal experience or the personal culture is really effective when you are designing a game. For example, and the designers actually are whatever they are designing is somehow the presentation of their thoughts and themselves. For example, if you are designing a game, that game is actually showing your story. It's showing your characteristic or it's showing your experience throughout the life, whatever you have experienced, wherever you have traveled, whatever you have eaten or the friends that you have made. Those are the really important thing that helps you design a game. And yeah, you will definitely have some favorite games that they are attached to certain parts of your life. For example, in your mind, you have some experience. You may not recall it when you find a game really interesting or amazing, but there is a connection between that game and a unique experience or unique event in your mind. So that they both match together that made up make
Right,
the
right.
game for you. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but
Just so
also yeah.
the question is basically asking you, like, do you have any favorite games that have made those connections for you in your experience?
Yeah, but we we have actually listed
I can see a
here.
whole, yeah. I think you just have to pull out one of them and just talk about it.
Maybe yeah.
This is a game introduced to them.
Yeah.
This
Okay, let us just quickly introduce you to two games. One of them is a Iranian game, and it's about a parrot and a grocer. It's a old Persian story, and it's about that we all hear in schools in the like first year of our school. We all hear it in our schools, and when we go camping, people tell the story in different versions. So this one actually has affected us and as designers to come up with the idea about the parrot who, for example, do something wrong in the store and runs away throughout the market, and you should chase it and find the parrot. So it resulted in this game. That story resulted in the game that we really like. But and about the game that really inspired us is this one called Prince Jing. It is designed by Roberto Fraga. He's a French designer. It actually has a very unique story of designing. Fraga, which we actually had different sessions with him through our events in Iran, has designed this game like 30 years ago, and it took him 20 years to finally make the design complete and produce the games.
And choose the themes.
Yeah. And about the theme of the game, for example, he just saw it's about a princess
In China.
Yeah, in China that wants to get to her lover, but you should face different obstacles and pass through guards to get to him. But the first point of inspiration was a Michael Jackson video.
And Egypt. And
the Egyptian story and era. But the game has developed through the ages. For example, he presented and pitched the game to different companies. For example, he selected different themes. For example, he gave it a Barbie theme or give it some Disney, famous Disney character themes, but none of them worked out until he finds a story about a princess in uh, China, and he gets it that that's the right theme and the story for the game. And it's
And
a very
yeah.
and it's a really famous game of Roberto Fraga, and it has won lots of awards. And as you can see, it also has a very unique uh, illustration, and everything goes well together. So it's one of our favorite game because we have studied the process of designing, and we actually learned a lot about the whole process of design and putting things together.
Excuse me, and to the
and
our
this one.
elements and
Yeah.
these elements we
Yeah,
talk
and the
about.
elements that we have talked about, I think that most of you have played Cluedo. It's a really, I think it's more than 60 years that people are playing Cluedo.
Every elements we talk about.
The 7 main major elements that we have talked about, you could see in Cluedo, because it's a murder story, and it has all those 7 points from the story side, and has enhanced them in the game process. And I think everybody knows the story of Cluedo. It's a murder case that someone is murdered in a party, and you are trying to figure out who have murdered the person, trying to using different clues that you gather with your friends and trying to solve the murder. And there's also one more perfect game that we are really proud of. It's actually a product of a bootcamp event that we have. It's called Eid Azad. This game is about pottery. As you can see on the cover, it's a pottery master, let's call it that. It's actually driven from the culture of Iranian on making pottery, and it's more than 5,000 many years that people are
10,000.
Yeah, 10,000 years that people are doing pottery in Iran, and it's a unique cultural value. So this game is deriving from that. Whenever we are showing this game and talking about it with different people, everybody loved it because it's something that people share in the community, and everybody is so proud of different potteries, and we all have very old vases and all those stuff in our houses. So when we face the game, it's really interesting to us.
And all of them is a conveyor of culture.
And all of the games that we just showed you, they are cultural conveyors. They convey different stories from different part of the world as well.
Right. That's beautiful. I just love the fact that you can just turn around and pick out games. I mean, I could just open up a game and let's all play a board game together. Okay, I'm just going to quickly take the last question because we are also running out of time. The last question is what I would like to know. Do you think it is necessary to have diverse people in your team to showcase the culture appropriately? Like, can someone from the USA, only based on knowledge, represent Indian culture in a game? Or do you need an Indian developer for this?
Well, actually, it's a really great question because, that person, for example, someone like me, I love the Indian culture and never had the chance to travel to India. I have a perception and attitude toward Indian culture, which is unique only to me and is definitely different from yours. And I think that would be also an interesting aspect to it, because maybe someone is from a different culture and wants to convey a message with a culture that he is not actually native in it. That's also a really interesting fact. And if you see, there are games
to learn about.
yeah. They will also learn through the process, and there are lots of games that are designed. For example, as this one, as I mentioned, the Prince Jean, the game that we show you, is designed by a French designer, but the story is about for example, it's a Chinese princess. So yeah, maybe if the designers gather lots of information and do the process right, maybe it leads to a game that is very unique, and even maybe something that is better than for example, a Chinese designer that was going to design that game.
داستان شاید واقعا اینو اینجوری نداشته باشن.
یعنی چی؟
تو داستان نویسی فرانسوی داستان نمیتونه راجع به چین بنویسه.
Yeah. And the thing is that, for example, a French designer or an Iranian designer is not able to write a story about Indian cultures. Yeah, so they will use that stories that we mentioned before. They have to study the culture first to get an idea and get an attitude toward what they have studied. So it would be a unique version of the designer's experience and skills.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. Because, I mean, I've experienced it in my own experience. Right? I've traveled, and if I meet someone who's not from India, I realize through conversation that they have more knowledge than I have, because India is so huge.
Different point of view. Yeah,
and I live in this bubble of one part of India, but that other person has actually traveled and has a very different perspective.
Exactly.
So I think
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to kind of see it as well, right? But yeah, I think so. We are I think we're done with our questions and we are on time as well. So this is perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking out the
Thank
time
you so much for having us.
here, and this was really exciting getting to know a very different perspective also on just storytelling and gaming, right? But like still so many new learnings from this sharing. And yeah, thank you once again, and I would really like to thank the audience. You all have been really like patient, really interactive. I was just enjoying the discussions, and just the trigger points from the talk, and you're just having informal discussions, and that is the purpose of this. So thank you so much again. I do that.